This collection has raced, jumped, and crashed in movies and on racetracks around the world. Motorcycles, more than 200 of them. All owned by a daredevil turned stuntman.
There's no question that motorcycles started my career and are still a very big part of it.
His profession is his collection. And for Gary Davis, motorcycles are a good life.
People say that I have a big collection of motorcycles, or they say this is a motorcycle museum. Truth of the matter is, this is just my toy box.
Davis's giant toy box is a 9,000 square foot shop next to his Northern California home. The collection is relatively new, but he's been playing with motorcycles since he was 14.
When I was a kid in high school, I had a 160 Honda, but if you were cool, you had a Gold Star, and I couldn't afford a Gold Star.
The BSA Gold Star DBD-34 was the most advanced motorcycle engine of its time. It dominated racing during the 60s and was one of the last Gold Stars ever produced.
I have a few of them, and I purchased this one recently. It's kind of rough looking, as you can see. All my Gold Stars are DBD-34, which is the sought-after motors.
Even though while growing up he didn't have his dream bike, Davis had riding talent.
You have to be subtle about the movements you make on a motorcycle and stuff, and for some reason it came fairly natural to me.
All through high school, riding was just for fun. When he started racing, things turned serious.
I got second my first race.
He went on to be state champion. Soon, he was pro. But racing wasn't the only way to make a living in 1969. Top daredevil Evel Knievel was getting rich jumping over cars. Gary felt he could do even better, but it meant taking riding to the extreme.
In 1971, I started jumping motorcycles over cars for a living, a la Evel Knievel. My partner Rex Blackwell and myself used to cross in the air, and on our third jump, we went for the world record and jumped 21 cars, beating Evel's 19-car record at Ontario Motor Speedway.
The 1971 350 Honda Twin Davis rode to break the world record is still part of his collection. For a short time, Davis and Knievel continuously tried to outcompete each other. But when Hollywood came calling, Davis jumped at the chance to perform stunts in a movie about the legendary daredevil.
They needed a stuntman to come in and jump 120 feet while they blew both ramps up. And it sounded like an exciting endeavor, so I joined the picture business.
Gary thought he had done just about everything there was to do on a motorcycle, but the movie business forced him to do something he had always avoided.
Doubling Knievel, I had to throw the bike away at very high speeds, but I've never, ever really been hurt on a bike at all. I've never broken any bones on a motorcycle.
To date, he has worked on over 300 movies and TV shows. Now a stunt coordinator and director, he's been able to employ his collection.
Most of my newer bikes are used in lots of films, but up on the top shelf up there, there's the bike I used as Captain America, and we did 2 different pilots.
This 1976 Mako appeared with Gary in one of the very first movies about motocross.
We built 5 bikes that were called Sidewinder 1s for a movie called Sidewinder 1, and I only kept the 1.
Davis has also collected Evel Knievel memorabilia. No longer rivals. Today, they are friends.
So I have, his toys and his lunch boxes and posters and costumes and all kinds of stuff that kids would have had at that time.
Even though he loves the movie business, Gary really needs his downtime between pictures.
If I didn't have my motorcycles to come down here and work on every day, I'd have to be going to a shrink a couple of times a week.
There is no shortage of bikes to work on. Many, like this Vincent Lightning, are works in progress.
They're a fairly sought-after bike. They're highly respected. They were ahead of their time in almost everything they did. Their suspension, if you look at the suspension, is done like when Yamaha was so proud of themselves and they called themselves a monoshock. They built this triangular structured swing arm with a single shock that ran up underneath the tank. Well, here's a bike from the early 50s that has the same exact suspension.
When completed, the Vincent will be a legal street bike. Many of the motorcycles take a long time to finish. Gary pieces them together, one part at a time. If something is missing, He'll place an order for the part, but by the time it arrives, he's off working on the next.
Most of the bikes I buy are in pretty rough shape, actually, because it's no fun for me to buy a restored motorcycle. That's somebody else's labor of love.
When restoring a motorcycle, Gary is willing to make alterations that purists wouldn't like.
On something like this Vincent, 90% of this bike is accurate to the era. However, I have aluminum wheels and stainless steel spokes, aluminum hubs, and things that it didn't necessarily have that I personally want in slightly later model carburetors. A true collector would diminish the points on my bike.
Another valuable bike in Gary's collection is the 1965 Triumph.
This is the most sought after of the stock Triumph frames. This is the frame that when TrackMaster first started, they designed all their geometry off of. Triumph prior to this year and after this year always had the forks raked out.
Bike after bike, each one slightly different from the next. They almost all have one thing in common.
In both motocross and in flat track, I'm 89. That's my current racing number. That's the number I rode when I was a professional racer. And then in road race, it was already taken, so I'm 890. And then in trials, I just run a number 2 on the front because that's the line that I run in the trials events.
If he's not working on his collection, Gary can be found on the track, testing his motorcycles prior to a race.
We'll go out and make a few laps and see if she still runs anyway. This is my little 350 Honda single, and it's in a TrackMaster frame, TrackMaster forks. And all my bikes have the kickstarters removed for flat trackers and my road racers, so I use this to start them, so I don't have to push them all the time because I'm getting too old to run behind them, you know. So let's see if I can even get her to run.
The oldest and rarest motorcycles Gary races are part of a class named after a prehistoric creature.
The dinosaur class is pre-51 or earlier motorcycle, and it's a 500cc limit with the exception of Harley-Davidson and Indians are allowed to run 750cc's.
Sometimes he will combine bikes for better performance.
This motorcycle is what they call a trib suds because it's a Triumph 650 motorcycle engine in a BSA A10 chassis. It handles like a Gold Star, except it has the Triumph twin motor in it. They're two of my favorite motocrossers, actually, although they're both pretty heavy to be thrown around on a constant pace.
All the bikes in the collection are serious riding machines, except for one.
I have a little road racer that's called a pocket bike. It's about 2 foot long and 16 inches high that it's almost impossible to ride from a guy my size.
Davis also has an extremely rare collectible, which he believes is a museum piece.
The Yamaha YDS-1R is one of my prized possessions. It's one of only 3 known to exist in America. It is the first production road racer Yamaha built. It's the highest classed motorcycle I have in my collection.
A sentimental favorite is a 1918 Indian known as a flat tracker. Davis likes it so much, he separated it from the rest of his collection and keeps it in his house.
I love the era as much as I do the bike. I love the way that racing was treated in those days, that it was a high-class event. In the early days in board track racing, the bikes were nothing more than a bicycle with a big V-twin engine in it.
Built by a legend in motorcycles, the 1956 BSA Gold Star holds the greatest sentimental value to Davis.
This bike was built by Ray Hensley. He was the founder of both Sonic Weld and of TrackMaster frames. It was the last motorcycle that he assembled before his death, and I miss him a lot, and this bike will never be away from me.
Davis does have a few modern bikes in his collection, but that doesn't mean they sit well with him.
This is a Enduro model that I just used for playing around on the ranch. This is a modern bike, so it feels alien to me already. You know, I mean, it's a nice cush bike, but I'm not used to that.
As long as Davis is around his toys, he feels like a big kid.
I don't want to ever grow up.
With a collection this size, he'll be playing with motorcycles for the rest of his life. Gary Davis has broken his back and shattered his ankle while performing stunts for TV and movies, but he's never been injured while riding a motorcycle. Modern Marvels Private Collections will return next on the History Channel.